History isn't a dressing-up box, full of costumes you can pull out to win a modern-day argument. It's so tempting, isn't it? To reach into the past and grab a convenient fact or a dramatic story to bolster a point you're trying to make today, right now, in 2025. Whether it's about politics, identity, or national pride, history becomes a rhetorical trump card, played with a flourish to silence an opponent. But when we do this, we are not truly engaging with the past. We are simply using it as a mirror for our own present-day concerns. And in doing so, we distort its true shape and miss its most valuable lessons. The problem with this approach is that it treats history as a collection of simple, isolated tales that can be easily categorized as good or bad. We pick our heroes and villains, our moments of glory and our moments of shame, and line them up on opposing sides of a contemporary debate. This turns the rich, messy, and often baffling story of our ancestors into a flattened, two-dimensional caricature. It robs the people of the past of their own complex realities, their own motivations, and their own contexts. They were not simply waiting in the wings of time to become evidence for our 21st century squabbles. They were living their own lives, as complicated and unpredictable as our own. The past is not a buffet from which we can pick and choose the bits we like and leave the rest. It is a vast, interconnected landscape that we must explore in its entirety. It is something that really happened. The events, the decisions, the triumphs and the tragedies were real experiences for the people who lived through them. To honor their memory and to truly learn from them, we must approach their world with curiosity and humility, not with a pre-written shopping list of points to prove. History is not a tool for ammunition, but a wellspring of understanding, offering us perspective that we desperately need in our often feverish present. Therefore, our goal should not be to win arguments with history, but to learn from it. It's about understanding the long, winding and often surprising road that has led us to where we are today. It requires us to embrace ambiguity and contradiction, to accept that things were rarely as simple as they seem from our distant vantage point. When we stop using history as a weapon, we can begin to appreciate it for what it truly is. A grand, sprawling and deeply human story that belongs to all of us, and which has profound lessons to teach if only we have the patience to listen. British history, in particular, is a wonderfully tangled affair, full of contradictions and unexpected turns that defy any attempt to impose a single simple narrative upon it. It is not a straight line marching proudly towards the present day. Instead, it is a messy, knotted thread, woven from countless different strands of triumph, disaster, high principle, and base greed. To try and unpick one single consistent story from this is a fool's errand. The very essence of our history lies in its complexity, its refusal to be straightforward. This is what makes it so endlessly fascinating and, if we are honest, so very human. Think of it like an old, sprawling country house that has been built and rebuilt over centuries. One wing is in a grand Tudor style, another is a severe Georgian addition, and a third is a fanciful Victorian folly. They do not all match, and they were not built according to some grand overarching plan. Each generation added what it needed or desired, sometimes tearing down old parts, sometimes building upon them. Our history is much the same. It is a story of constant adaptation, of making do and mending, of grand ambitions and unforeseen consequences, all piled on top of one another. This complexity means that you can find evidence for almost any argument you wish to make. Was Britain a beacon of liberty? Yes, you can point to Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights. Was it a brutal oppressor? Yes, you can point to the slave trade and imperial conquests. It was, of course, both of these things and many more besides, often at the very same time. The same society that produced passionate abolitionists also produced fabulously wealthy slave owners. The same political system that championed the rights of the freeborn Englishman often brutally suppressed dissent at home and abroad. Accepting this complexity is the first step towards true historical understanding. It requires us to hold opposing ideas in our minds at once, to see the shades of grey rather than just the black and white. It means acknowledging that the story of Britain is not a simple morality play. It is a sprawling, epic drama with a cast of millions, full of flawed heroes, sympathetic villains, and surprising plot twists. Our past is not a neat and tidy storybook. It is a rich, chaotic, and ultimately more truthful chronicle of human endeavour. One of the most remarkable features of British history is its extraordinary continuity. Unlike so many of our European neighbours who experienced devastating revolutions and invasions that swept away the old order entirely, Britain has, for the most part, managed to evolve rather than explode. We have not had a year zero moment since 1066. This relative stability, this unbroken chain stretching back through the centuries, has allowed some of our most distinctive institutions to survive and adapt in a way that is quite unique in the modern world. They are the living fossils of our history, still walking among us today. When you look closely, these ancient structures are everywhere. The monarchy, for all its modern reinventions, is an institution with roots deep in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Our universities, like Oxford and Cambridge, are medieval creations that have been centres of learning for over 800 years. The legal system, with its bewigged judges and ancient common law principles, carries the echoes of Norman and Plantagenet England. Even the local parishes, the regiments of the army and the counties that map our land are entities with centuries of history behind them, shaping our identity in ways we often don't even realise. This continuity does not mean that these institutions have remained unchanged. Far from it. Their genius lies in their very ability to bend without breaking, to adapt to the changing tides of society while retaining a core identity. The monarchy has transformed from a body of absolute power to a constitutional symbol. The universities have opened their doors from a tiny clerical elite to the wider population. They have survived by evolving, by absorbing new ideas and weathering political storms, proving themselves remarkably resilient. They are not museum pieces, but living parts of our national fabric. This long, unbroken history gives Britain a peculiar character. It provides a sense of deep-rootedness, a feeling that the present is securely anchored to a very long past. While this can sometimes lead to complacency or an over-reverence for tradition, it has also provided a powerful source of stability. It has allowed for gradual piecemeal change rather than violent upheaval, creating a political and social culture that has, for much of its history, managed to avoid the extremes that have torn other nations apart. These ancient institutions are the bedrock upon which modern Britain is built. Of all our surviving institutions, none is more central to the story of Britain than Parliament. It is often called the mother of parliaments for good reason, as its model of representative government has been copied, adapted and admired across the globe. Yet its development was not a smooth or preordained process. It grew out of centuries of messy arguments, power struggles, and hard-won compromises between the monarch and the people. Its very foundation rests on the principle that the government cannot do whatever it likes. It requires the consent of the governed, a radical idea that took centuries to fully establish. The journey of Parliament from a medieval council of nobles advising the king to the sovereign body of the nation is a dramatic story in itself. It is marked by great milestones that still resonate today. Think of Magna Carta in 1215, not a democratic document by any means, but a crucial first step in establishing that even a king was subject to the law. Think of the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320, asserting Scotland's independence and its right to choose its own monarch. And most decisively, think of the Bill of Rights of 1689, which followed the Glorious Revolution and firmly established Parliament's supremacy over the Crown. This system, confirmed in 1688, created a unique political framework. It established a government that was powerful but not absolute, and a system that could change and reform itself from within. It allowed for political opposition to be institutionalized, not treated as treason. This meant that great social and political changes could be achieved through debate, legislation, and gradual reform, rather than through bloody revolution. It created a path that avoided the extremes of absolute monarchy on one hand and mob rule on the other, a middle way that has become a hallmark of British political culture. However, the story of Parliament is not over. In recent decades, a profound question has arisen. Is Parliament still truly sovereign? Successive governments have transferred significant powers to international bodies and other authorities, leading many to wonder where ultimate power now lies. This is not just a dry constitutional debate. It goes to the very heart of our historical identity and the system of government that has defined us for centuries. The story of Parliament is a continuing one, and its future, like its past, will be shaped by the arguments and choices of the present generation. There's a popular and well-meaning idea today that Britain was made by immigrants. And while migration has certainly been a part of our story, particularly in recent times, this popular narrative is, well, a vast oversimplification of our long and often violent formation. The truth, you see, is much more complex and, dare I say, less gentle. To understand who the British are, we must look not just at peaceful arrivals, but at a history punctuated by invasion, conquest, and the forcible creation of new identities. The foundations of this nation were often laid not with a welcoming hand, but rather with the sword. Our story begins with the Romans. Before their arrival, there was no single entity called Britain. The island was, in fact, a patchwork of Celtic tribes. It was the Roman legions who forcibly conquered and unified the southern part of the island, creating the province of Britannia. They imposed their laws, their language, and their infrastructure, forging a new, albeit temporary, identity. When the legions departed, this structure crumbled, and a new wave of invaders, the Germanic Angles, Saxons and Jutes, arrived not as migrants seeking a new life, but as conquerors who displaced and dominated the native Romano-British population. Out of this chaos, a new identity began to form. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms eventually coalesced into Engleland, a land of the English, largely in response to another wave of brutal invasions, this time by the Vikings. Just as this English identity was solidifying, it was shattered and remade once more by the Norman conquest of 1066. This was not migration. It was a hostile takeover by a French-speaking military elite who seized control of the land, the church, and the government, fundamentally reshaping the country's language and culture forever. This event was the last successful invasion of England, and it set the stage for centuries to come. For the next 900 years, from 1066 until the late 20th century, immigration from outside the British Isles was remarkably small. The population was shaped far more by internal movements, the Welsh, the Scots, the Irish, and by the slow merging of the Anglo-Saxon and Norman cultures. The idea of Britain as a nation, perpetually built by waves of newcomers from across the world, is a very recent phenomenon. Our deeper history is a starker tale, one of successive ruling classes imposing their will through force, with each conquest leaving an indelible layer on the complex identity we now call British. The entity we now call Great Britain is not an ancient primordial kingdom. It is a political construction, and a relatively recent one at that. It was formally born in 1707 with the Act of Union between the kingdoms of England and Scotland. This was not a conquest, but a treaty, though one born of immense pressure and unequal power. For many in Scotland, it felt less like a willing marriage and more like a necessary, if reluctant, business arrangement. The English, for their part, were often less than enthusiastic, viewing the union with a degree of suspicion and indifference. It was a pragmatic deal, not a romantic one. The primary driver for the union, from the Scottish perspective, was a desperate need for economic security and political stability. Scotland, in the late 17th century, was in a dire state, crippled by famine and the catastrophic failure of the Darien scheme, an ambitious attempt to establish a colony in Panama that bankrupted the nation. The Union offered access to England's growing colonial trade networks and the promise of a more stable future. For the English, the main advantage was security, ensuring that Scotland could never again ally with France and pose a threat on its northern border. What made the Union work, however, was its flexibility. From the very beginning, it was not a complete absorption of Scotland into England. The Scots were shrewd negotiators and managed to retain control over their most cherished institutions. Their distinctive legal system, their education system, and most importantly, their Presbyterian church, were all preserved. This meant that while Scotland was part of a larger political state, it retained a strong sense of its own separate national identity and a significant degree of self-governance in practice. This pragmatic compromise was the secret to the Union's longevity. Today, the future of that 300-year-old Union is once again a subject of intense debate. The partnership that was forged out of economic necessity and strategic calculation must continue to prove its worth to both sides. Its history shows us that it was never a single unified entity, but a collaboration that has ebbed and flowed over time. Its survival has always depended on it working for the mutual benefit of the nations that comprise it. The story of the Union of 1707 is a powerful reminder that national identities are not fixed, but are constantly being negotiated, challenged, and remade. No aspect of British history is more contentious today than the British Empire. For some, it represents a source of national pride, a time when a small island nation shaped the entire globe. For others, it is a source of profound shame, a brutal history of exploitation, racism, and violence. The truth, as is so often the case, is a deeply uncomfortable and contradictory mixture of both. The empire was not a monolithic entity built with a single purpose. As the historian J.R. Seeley famously remarked, it seems Britain acquired its empire as if in a fit of absence of mind. It grew piecemeal, driven by a motley collection of merchants, missionaries, adventurers and officials. There was no grand blueprint for imperial conquest. The empire began in the 17th century as a series of private ventures for trade and settlement, not as a project of the state. Companies like the East India Company were motivated by profit, not by a desire to paint the map pink. Over time, these commercial interests drew the British state deeper and deeper into global affairs, leading to governance, administration, and military control. It created a vast global economic system, established English as a world language, and imposed its own systems of law and order, sometimes with a very heavy hand, across a quarter of the planet. The impact of this global dominance was immense and double-edged. The empire connected the world in unprecedented ways, spreading technologies, ideas, and institutions. But this was often achieved through coercion and violence, disrupting ancient societies and exploiting local populations and resources for economic gain. To its critics today, the empire is the ultimate symbol of Western arrogance and the root cause of many of the world's modern inequalities. For a long time, Britain gained remarkably little direct economic benefit from this vast undertaking. It was an enterprise that cost a great deal in blood and treasure for surprisingly little net return to the nation itself. Understanding the empire requires us to grapple with these contradictions. It was a project that brought both immense suffering and, in some cases, order and development. It was driven by a complex mix of greed, strategic anxiety, and a genuine, if often misguided, sense of a civilizing mission. It was an accidental creation that grew to become the largest empire in human history. And its legacy, both positive and negative, continues to shape our world in countless ways. To ignore its complexities is to fail to understand a crucial chapter of our own story and the story of the modern world. It is impossible to talk about the British Empire without confronting its darkest and most shameful chapter, the transatlantic slave trade. For over a century, Britain was a leading participant in this horrific commerce in human lives. The immense profits generated from sugar plantations in the Caribbean, worked by enslaved Africans under brutal conditions, helped to fuel Britain's economic rise. Port cities like Liverpool and Bristol grew rich on the back of this trade, and the wealth it created permeated through British society. For a time, the ownership of enslaved people was a mark of status and a source of immense fortune. Yet what makes the British story so extraordinary is not just its deep involvement in slavery, but its pioneering role in its abolition. In the late 18th century, something incredible happened. A moral shift began to take hold, driven by a small but fiercely dedicated group of Quaker and evangelical campaigners like William Wilberforce and Thomas Clarkson. They began a public campaign that was unprecedented in its scale and ambition, arguing that slavery was a moral abomination and a stain on the nation's soul. They turned slave ownership from a source of prestige into a cause for public shame. This campaign was astonishingly successful. It captured the public imagination, leading to mass petitions, boycotts of slave-produced sugar, and relentless political pressure. After a 20-year struggle, Parliament passed the Slave Trade Act in 1807, abolishing the trade throughout the empire. Then, in 1833, it went even further, abolishing slavery itself. This was not a decision based on economics. It was a moral choice that came at a staggering financial cost. The British government paid out £20 million, a colossal sum at the time, equivalent to 40% of its entire annual budget, to compensate the slave owners for their loss of property. This was arguably one of the greatest social revolutions in world history. It was the moment when a powerful nation turned its back on a practice that had been accepted for millennia and used its global power to end it. For the rest of the 19th century, the Royal Navy patrolled the seas at great expense to suppress the slave trade of other nations. This dramatic reversal does not erase the horrors of Britain's past involvement in slavery, but it stands as a powerful testament to the capacity for moral change. It shows that history is not just a story of economic interests, but also one of shifting ideas and the power of conscience. As we look back over the long, sprawling saga of British history, one thing becomes clear. Very little of it was planned. Our story is not the result of a grand design or an inevitable destiny. Instead, as the great philosopher David Hume observed, Britain's remarkably successful and stable system of government seems to have been the product of a great measure of accident, combined with just a small ingredient of wisdom and foresight. We have stumbled into our empire, our unions, and our revolutions as often as we have purposefully marched towards them. Success has often been a matter of luck, timing, and muddling through. This should give us a sense of humility. We are the inheritors of a legacy that was built not just on genius and principle, but also on chance, compromise, and sheer good fortune. Our ancestors were not giants who had all the answers. They were people like us, wrestling with the challenges of their own time, often with incomplete information and conflicting motives. Recognizing the role of accident in our history frees us from the burden of trying to find a perfect heroic past. It allows us to see our history more clearly, with all its flaws, contradictions, and surprising successes. The danger we face today is that we might forget the importance of that small ingredient of wisdom. In our noisy, polarized world, it is easy to become so focused on using history to fight our present-day battles that we fail to seek out its real lessons. We risk losing the ability to compromise, to see the other side's point of view, and to appreciate the delicate balance of institutions and traditions that have, by and large, served us so well. If we treat our history as nothing more than a source of grievances or simplistic patriotic slogans, we discard the very wisdom that we need to navigate the future. The real task, then, is to approach our past with an open mind. We must seek to understand it in all its messy, inconvenient, and glorious complexity. History's greatest gift is perspective. It reminds us that our present moment is not the end of the story, and that the world can change in ways we can barely imagine. If we can rediscover that small but crucial ingredient of wisdom and foresight that Hume spoke of, we can learn from the accidents of our past and use those lessons to build a better future, not just for Britain, but for the world.